We tend to treat mind-altering substances as a modern glitch, a byproduct of industrial chemistry or counterculture. But if you look deep inside the archaeological record, tracing the flickering firelight of ancient caves, you find a different story. The drive to alter consciousness is a prehistoric constant. Long before humans built cities, our hominin ancestors were foraging across the African savanna. According to the instrumentalization model in evolutionary anthropology, as these early humans scavenged for food, they actively encountered and ingested fungi containing psilocybin, the active chemical agent in magic mushrooms. This diagram shows the mechanics of that encounter. When psilocybin enters the system, it targets and stimulates the 5-HT2A serotonin receptors in the brain. It acts as a chemical catalyst, triggering a cascading burst of new neural connections. This sudden crosstalk between regions forces cognitive flexibility and highly associative thinking. In the harsh, competitive environment of prehistory, this behavior provided a distinct evolutionary advantage. The ritualized use of these substances offered the chemical scaffolding that helped early humans manage psychological stress, develop complex storytelling, and bond together into cooperative groups. As humanity transitioned from foraging bands into complex agricultural societies, these psychoactive plants were integrated into the culture. They became institutionalized components of statecraft, early medicine, and tightly regulated sacred rituals. This timeline shows the global diversity of early drug use, from brewing wild barley in Israel to the ceremonial use of mushrooms in Algeria and wine production in Georgia. Unrelated cultures independently discovered and utilized mind-altering flora native to their environments. Looking at this ancient Egyptian fresco, you see figures ritually consuming the blue lotus. The stunning water lily was tied to magical religious rites, the god Osiris, and beliefs about the afterlife. When soaked in fermented wine to release its active alkaloids, the flower served as a psychotropic tool. Across the Atlantic, pre-Inca shamans in the Americas developed a sophisticated understanding of local pharmacology. They figured out how to precisely combine two entirely distinct plant species to bypass the human stomach's digestive enzymes. This synergy orally activated DMT to create the hallucinogenic brew known as ayahuasca. In these civilizations, the ingestion of a substance followed a precise architecture: strict dietary fasting, deep rhythmic chanting, and oversight of a ritual specialist. Within this framework, a hallucinogen functioned not as a recreational escape, but as a pragmatic tool for diagnosing illness, ensuring a successful hunt, or navigating a community crisis. The human relationship with these substances stayed largely grounded in the spiritual realm until the Industrial Revolution. In 1806, a German pharmacist successfully isolated a single active compound, morphine, from crude opium. This breakthrough birthed modern pharmacology. It proved that a plant's effects didn't come from a mystical vital force. The power was concentrated in specific, measurable, and extractable molecular structures. This matrix divides these molecules into 4 classes. Psychedelics stimulate serotonin receptors, disintegrating the default mode network to allow global brain communication. Stimulants block reuptake transporters, flooding synapses with dopamine. Depressants mimic endorphins, while dissociatives cap glutamate receptors, disconnecting sensory input to induce sedation. Zoom in close enough and the spiritual aura vanishes. Under a microscope, these isolated molecules are morally neutral biochemicals. A crystal of mescaline or a drop of morphine possesses no inherent goodness, no evil intent, and no spiritual agenda. They are biochemical compounds acting upon cellular hardware, but humans rarely leave a powerful tool alone. As European colonial empires expanded between the 16th and 19th centuries, they uprooted these isolated molecules from their localized, sacred traditions. European demand for stimulating agricultural commodities overhauled global economies. This tobacco plant, specifically the milder strains cultivated in colonial Virginia, became a lucrative cash crop. The demand to grow it on vast plantations directly fueled the transatlantic slave trade. Empires soon learned to weaponize these molecules. Facing a severe trade deficit with China, the British East India Company began mass-producing addictive opium. They smuggled it into southern Chinese ports. When the Qing dynasty attempted to destroy the stockpiles, the British responded with naval force, triggering the Opium Wars to enforce their right to sell narcotics. By the turn of the 20th century, synthetic chemistry allowed pharmaceutical companies to mass-produce concentrated chemicals. Bayer even synthesized and marketed a new cough medicine under the brand name heroin. The result of this unrestricted medical mass production was an addiction crisis that increased opiate dependency six-fold in the United States. Public perception shifted. Within decades, substances once marketed as medical miracles were redefined in the law as sources of moral decay and social menace. This transition culminated in an era of federal regulation, international scheduling, and the criminalization of the war on drugs. The pharmacology of the plant hadn't changed, but law, political anxiety, and economic greed had overwritten the natural molecule. We had shifted its cultural meaning from a sacred tool to one of risk and criminality. Today, we are living through a modern reevaluation. We are in the midst of a psychedelic renaissance, where the stigmas of the late 20th century are giving way to empirical, scientific research. Substances classified as having no medical value for decades, like psilocybin and MDMA, are now demonstrating significant efficacy in FDA-monitored Phase 2 trials. These results suggest a new pathway for treating severe, intractable conditions, like treatment-resistant depression and PTSD. But integrating these compounds into modern Western medicine brings a deep ethical tension. As billions of dollars flow into clinical research, pharmaceutical entities are engaging in bioprospecting, attempting to extract and patent traditional indigenous medicines for corporate profit. This cycle of extraction has a painful history. In 1955, an amateur mycologist participated in a mushroom ceremony guided by the Mazatec curandera, Maria Sabina. Despite promising secrecy, he published a sensationalized account of the ritual, sparking an influx of Western seekers who extracted her botanical knowledge without offering reciprocity to the indigenous creators. This leaves modern science facing a dilemma. As we isolate these compounds in sterile laboratories, can Western biomedicine safely and effectively separate these ancient molecules from the spiritual and ecological frameworks that structured their use for millennia? Which brings us back to the evolutionary question we started with. Did mind-altering substances shape the foundation of human civilization, or did human civilization ultimately shape them? The historical record suggests it's both. These natural compounds served as chemical catalysts for early human cognition and social bonding, but a molecule sitting in a petri dish has no inherent moral alignment. Today, it is human society alone, through our shifting laws, our cultural stigmas, and our economic markets, that decides whether a chemical structure is a sacrament, a medicine, a commodity, or a crime.